A very good evening to our viewers and welcome to this edition of the Evening Review. My name is Theo Mujoro, your host. Let's have a look at today's front page of Namibian Sun. Tonight on the show, we are welcoming back the Chief Electoral Officer of the Electoral Commission of Namibia, Theo Mujoro, to brief us obviously about the elections, the by-election rather, in Opuwo Rural Constituency taking place tomorrow, just to fill us in on the preparedness and everything there too. Theo, welcome back to Evening Review.
Toiwo, good evening and thanks for having me on your show again.
Wonderful, wonderful. Tomorrow you are having a by-election in Opuwo Rural Constituency in probably the toughest time of our country as far as COVID-19 is concerned. You held a very successful election, local and regional election last year, still with COVID being in our midst, but the times are extraordinary this time. How are you preparing for that?
Yeah, thank you very much once again. I think, first of all, it's important to mention here that this particular vacancy occurred on the 4th of April this year. That is when the former councillor of this particular constituency died. Now, in terms of the Regional Councils Act, the Electoral Commission is obligated to conduct a by-election within a period of 90 days from the day the vacancy occurs. So for that reason, we have engaged our stakeholders, primarily the political parties. We have developed an election schedule for this particular by-election. We have already concluded the supplementary registration of voters. And right now, we are preparing to conduct this particular by-election tomorrow, Friday, which is the 2nd of July, 2021. We have completed the training of all our officials, including the political party agents and also members of the Namibian police who will be assigned to man the various polling stations when we conduct the by-election tomorrow. All the materials are in place. So basically, in terms of the logistical preparations, we have done what we should have done to ensure that tomorrow we can all observe a smooth election process. Now, you have talked about conducting elections during these very, very difficult times. We know that government is doing all it can to protect lives and livelihoods at this very difficult moment in terms of the unfolding of the COVID-19 pandemic. I want to mention to you, Toivo, that when we conducted the 2020 regional and local authority elections, it was done at a time when this very same pandemic was ravaging the country in as much as it did basically to all countries of the world. Now, what we have done in preparation of the elections of last year, as the Electoral Commission, we have developed a COVID-19 mitigation strategy. In as much as government at the national level has introduced and is implementing regulations to make sure that people comply with the established measures and protocols to make sure that people are not exposed to this very dangerous virus. In terms of securing the health and safety of voters and basically all stakeholders participating in the electoral process, in the various facets of the electoral process, we have a strategy in place which is basically implemented to augment and reinforce the already existing national regulations. For example, when voters visit the various polling stations tomorrow, starting at 7 a.m. in the morning until 9 p.m. to cast their ballots, it would be expected that any one person coming to the polling stations, it would be mandatory of them to wear their face masks. We will be working hand in hand with the Namibian police force. We have Namibian police force personnel assigned to all the respective polling stations to ensure that all persons who will be participating in the electoral process tomorrow complies with the protocols and adheres to the measures that are in place at this time, not only in terms of wearing the face masks, but also ensuring that the rule on social distancing is complied with. On our part as the Electoral Commission, we will also ensure that at all material times during this process, that we disinfect our electoral materials and equipment, that we properly space out the various processes inside the polling station so that we also comply with the social distancing requirement. So we are doing our bit to make sure that people can participate in the various processes of these elections, and at the same time, they can have the peace of mind that we have done whatever is necessary to make sure that we keep and we curb the further spread of this virus during the electoral process. So we are really doing our bit to make sure that we do not reverse the gains of government in terms of really curbing and keeping the further spread of this dangerous virus to a minimum. So we are doing our bit. We understand that times are really tough. But again, as the Electoral Commission, we have an obligation to make sure that we basically conform and fulfill the demands of the relevant and applicable laws.
Thank you, Mr. Mujoro, for that elaborate answer. In the context of, you spoke about the gains that have been made so far, and that, of course, you were referring to government, but the gains have also been made by the ECN in making sure that it put in place preparations for this election tomorrow. After putting so much effort into preparing for this, you also want the participation of the voters to be as good as it can be in terms of the numbers, because also it speaks very well to our democracy that you want the proper reflection of the democratic voice being made there. What do you see, what are you hearing from your team on the ground in terms of the general appetite of participating in an election at a time difficult as this one?
Yes, again, in terms of voter education and voter information dissemination, I think the Electoral Commission can only do so much. Obviously, when we started implementing the electoral schedule, we have done so in close collaboration with all registered political parties that we had expected. that they may have an interest in contesting this particular by-election. We have provided all the information that we ought to have provided. So similarly, we have been on the ground. I must add here that in terms of the topography or the geographical setting of this particular constituency, it is quite unique and different. We have deployed we have about 81 polling stations in total. But when you look at most of the areas in terms of the small villages spread across the width and breadth of this particular constituency, it's such that you have to cover quite a number of large distances. But then when you look at the road conditions, it's quite a challenge. So we have done the best we could to make sure that we talk to the electorate. We have about 8,200 registered voters in this particular constituency. We have been going from one place to the next to make sure that we impart the information that is required in terms of what is happening when, in as far as the supplementary registration process is concerned, but I think also generally to explain to the residents and specifically to the registered voters the importance for them to participate in this by-election that is taking place tomorrow. Again, it is very difficult at the point of these indirections to measure the interest of people. It is possible that this very dangerous pandemic that we are living through today could discourage people from going to the polling stations. But I think I have a duty to assure the stakeholders, including the voters, that we have done the best we can, and to encourage people to come out in large numbers to participate in this very important democratic discourse. I think the application of the COVID protocols and rules, the same way you would have the need to go and do shopping at the shopping mall, I think one should similarly attach similar importance to go and participate in the electoral process, but of course being mindful of what is required from each and every participant in terms of complying with the protocols, with the measures that are in place, to make sure that when we participate in this process, we do not only protect ourselves, but I think also those that are around us. So I think, Toivo, to really come back to your question, it is possible that given this unfolding situation, personally, I have never observed so much death around me, as to in terms of what we are currently living through and experiencing. I know that what is currently happening could deter or could discourage people to participate in this process, but I think life has to go on. There are things that we need to do. I think we are talking about protecting lives, but I think also livelihoods. And I think the whole democratization process, for which election is a very important pillar, also contributes largely to the sustenance of livelihoods of people in all our constituencies. So for that reason, in as much as we are living through this dangerous pandemic, I think other aspects, other facets of life should continue. And I think all of us, stakeholders, political parties, political party leaders, the voters, we must heed the advice and the call of the health authorities. I think it's very important. We have benefited greatly from the health literacy being advocated by the Ministry of Health officials all over the country in terms of what we can do to protect ourselves and those around us. So unfortunately, Toivo, these elections will continue. It must continue. And we can only urge people to conform and comply with the health protocols. And on the part of the Electoral Commission, as I have stated earlier on, we will do the best we can that people can participate in these processes without being exposed to the risk of this dangerous coronavirus.
Indeed, Mr. Mujoro. How many political parties are participating in this particular by-election?
Yes, we have 5 political parties that will be contesting the by-election tomorrow. We have NUDO, we have the PDM, we have Rally for Democracy and Progress, we have the Swapo Party of Namibia, and lastly, we have IPC. So we have 5 candidates representing the 5 parties that I have just mentioned here. And as I've indicated earlier on, we want people to have confidence in our process, to trust the process. We have deployed the best people on the ground to make sure that all aspects of this by-election are properly taken care of. In fact, because of the rural nature of this particular constituency, I do not expect that we would see people queuing up by the time we have to close the polls at 9 p.m. tomorrow evening. So for that reason, we are urging people to go early to the polling stations to cast their votes. We are also urging people to look on the lookout, especially in the far-flung villages, in the remote parts of this particular constituency, to follow the polling timetable in terms of by which time to expect the mobile teams. Because when you look at the stations we have deployed, we have determined there is a significant number of mobile polling stations. In other words, where we will have mobile teams visiting particular polling stations. We expect that we are advising that once the mobile teams arrives, that people move as quickly as possible, cast their votes, so that these teams can then move on to the very next points in terms of the timetable. So because of the nature and the setup of this particular constituency, I do not expect that by the close of polls at 9 p.m. tomorrow evening, that we would observe people in queues. And I'm saying this deliberately to link it to the new curfew time as announced yesterday by the relevant authorities, which is it's now 9 p.m. But of course, we are working very closely with the Namibian police. And I think it's a very manageable situation. It's not a densely populated urban constituency. It is a rural constituency, and with the collaboration of the police, we will ensure that people who happen to be casting their votes just before the curfew time, which is basically the time polls are expected to be closed, that they then, as soon as they do so, that they then immediately go to their places of residence without, in order not to be in violation of the new regulations as announced in the context of the new COVID-19 measures.
Indeed, and Theo, again, the ECN last year migrated from the electronic voting machine system to ballot papers. I suppose those are the ones that you will be using tomorrow, and if yes, is there any timeline set by ECN as to how long you will continue to use the ballot system, or are we back sort of permanently to ballots?
Yes, Toivo, I think we all now know and understand the history of the EVMs in terms of the landmark Supreme Court judgment, which was handed down by the Supreme Court. I think it was in February of the year 2020, Following that, the directive to the Electoral Commission were quite clear that we are not permitted to use electronic voting machines unless we can do so with the simultaneous use of the VVPAT or the voter verified paper audit trails. I can tell you and the viewers that at this point, Toivo, we have not been able to acquire the VVPAT technology. So I think from my standpoint, we will be using manual ballot papers for the foreseeable future. I also want to mention here that we have undertaken an initiative of engaging our stakeholders, starting with political parties. We have already presented our ideas to political parties through the Political Party Liaison Committee platform of engagement with political parties. We have written to them. We have highlighted all the important issues around the EVM discussion. And I think at some point in future, we will continue with this engagement so that we can, before any final decisions are taken around this particular issue, that we can then also hear from our stakeholders, specifically political parties. So for the foreseeable future, we will be using manual ballot papers, and we will be keeping up, we will be keeping in check, the whatever new developments around the VVPAT technology, and we will make announcements at the appropriate time in future. But I think for now, we are conducting elections using manual ballot papers.
Theo, there's also an upcoming, looming by-election in Katima urban constituency in the Zambezi region, following the recent passing away of the councillor there. At what stage are we to prepare for that particular by-election?
Yes, Toivo, you are right. Again, for the Katima urban constituency of the Zambezi region, as you rightly said, we tragically lost the late councillor. This vacancy occurred on the 26th of May. I'm happy to mention here that we have already started to implement the election schedule for this particular by-election. We have accordingly informed all our stakeholders that we are now implementing the schedule of this particular by-election. I can mention here that we have already concluded the supplementary registration of voters process, which took place from the 21st to the 23rd of June. And I can also confirm here that we have determined a date on which this particular by-election will take place, and that date would be the 25th of August, the year 2021. So the implementation of this particular schedule is in motion as we speak, and we are in touch with the relevant stakeholders in terms of keeping them informed about the various aspects regarding the implementation of this particular schedule. So we are fully prepared in terms of readying our systems, our equipment, our materials. We have already appointed relevant persons to take charge of various processes and activities with respect to the implementation of that particular schedule.
The final question to you, Mr. Mujoro, is one of my favorite questions that I always pose to you when I get a chance to speak to you. And that is really that ECN for a long time has been advising lawmakers to come up with a law that would curtail on the issue of by-elections, because especially when there's still a long time before the next election is held, to save resources and also to respect perhaps the democratic choices that people have made. If I remember correctly, the suggestion has been to say the law, that proposed law, should make provision that if if a councillor passes on or is removed in some way from that constituency, that a candidate from that particular party simply take over because the party has already been given a mandate for that 5-year term. Do you still share that view, and do you feel in the face of all this new unprepared, maybe not unprepared, but in this new series of by-elections, that that point actually proves just how important it is to maybe do things that way?
Yes, Trevor, well, this particular issue is potentially contentious in terms. I'm just trying to say that it's likely to generate a lot of divergent views. But I must mention here that we are currently in the process of developing an Electoral Act amendment bill. In other words, we are looking carefully at the current Electoral Act with a view to highlight a number of issues that we would then present to all our stakeholders for consideration before the final draft amendment bill is presented to the relevant institutions for onward processing. And in respect to the issue that you have pointed out there, it could be a good opportunity for people to consider and think about alternative options of managing situations if and when a vacancy occurs. As you rightly said, Toivo, when a councillor representing a political party is installed, that party and that councillor, for that matter, is given a 5-year term. In other words, is a tenure of 5 years. In other words, the mandate given to the candidate and therefore the political party is 5 years to take charge of the leadership of that particular constituency. So I feel that it may be a good thing when the councillor vacates the office through death or incapacitation, or is recalled by the political party, whatever the case may be. I believe that it may be a good idea as we look at the Electoral Act for stakeholders to consider the option of requesting the political party whom this particular candidate comes from or belongs to simply make a substitute so that the new candidate can serve for the unexpired portion of the 5-year tenure. I mean, given the economic times that we are going through, compounded by the COVID-19 pandemic, I believe that it is really stretching our resources in terms of government budgeting to run a by-election. One by-election cost the taxpayer no less than 1.5 million Namibian dollars. And I think as we evolve as a democracy, as a society, I sincerely believe that there is nothing wrong to consider new, innovative ways of doing things. Of course, when you look at the Constitution and other instruments, you would read that for a councillor to get into office, he or she is to be directly elected by the people in that particular constituency. But I think we need to involve with times. We need to take a wide enough view of new circumstances. And for that reason, I believe that it is not a bad thing to consider a different alternative to managing constituency vacancies if and when they occur. But at the end of the day, it's a very topical issue. I believe it's likely to generate a lot of debate. And at the end of the day, really, it's really up to political stakeholders, political parties, civil society, everybody to weigh in and share their thoughts and perspectives on such an issue.
Indeed, Theo, thank you very much for your time and all the best for tomorrow and, of course, for August 25 in Katima urban elections. But otherwise, may I wish you and your staff the best of luck and also to be very, very safe as we continue to navigate our way past this COVID-19 pandemic.
Thank you very much for your time, Trevor. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.